thought I'd packed away the past, but the box waited. When I say that, I mean it literally. I was standing in my mother's old bedroom, sorting through the last of her things. My name is Margaret. I'm 57, retired after decades at the school office, and for the first time, the house felt too still. I'd promised myself this would be the final day of cleaning before selling. The afternoon sun poured through the thin curtains, making the faded wallpaper look softer than I remembered. The kettle whistled from the kitchen, the same sound that once meant comfort, not emptiness. I paused, letting the warmth of those sounds fill me. The house smelled of dust and perfume, that old floral scent she always wore. For a moment, it felt like she was still here. I touched the chipped counter, remembering her humming under her breath as she counted out coins for groceries. I'd promised to keep the place tidy after she was gone, but instead I delayed for weeks, afraid of what silence might say back. It was quiet enough to hear the clock ticking toward 4. I told myself this was just cleaning, nothing more. Then I found the box. It was tucked under a stack of winter coats, wrapped in tape so brittle it snapped when I touched it. My heart started racing before I even saw what was inside. I sat on the floor, the light shifting toward gold. Inside were old letters, yellowed and delicate, tied with a ribbon. Beneath them, a photograph. My mother, young, smiling, standing beside a man I didn't recognize, and at the bottom, one letter in her handwriting, sealed and addressed to someone named Paul. The perfume hit first, the same brand she'd worn every Sunday. It mixed with dust in the air, sharp and nostalgic all at once. I hesitated. My first thought was to close the lid and pretend I hadn't seen it. Some doors stay closed for a reason. But curiosity pressed harder than fear. I opened the envelope, unfolding the pages carefully. "My dear Paul," it began. My eyes caught on the next line. "I wish you could have met our child." The word "our" hit like a slap. I reread it again and again. My chest felt tight. I thought I'd misread, but there it was. Her voice, her confession. My mind spun with questions I couldn't even form. Paul who? Our child? Meaning me? I whispered the name aloud like it might answer back. I tried to steady my breathing. Maybe it was some misunderstanding, a poetic phrase. My mother had been dramatic at times, emotional in her writing, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. She'd been deliberate, careful with words. Every letter she ever wrote carried weight. The warmth of the room started to feel wrong. The wallpaper that once seemed soft now looked like peeling skin. My stomach twisted. The house, the inheritance, the quiet. Suddenly, none of it belonged to me the way I thought. If she'd hidden this, what else had she erased? I remembered her, warning once, years ago, when I'd asked about my father's photo. She'd said, "Not everything helps to know, Maggie." I'd laughed then, thinking it was just her way of ending uncomfortable talk. Now it echoed with meaning I didn't want to face. I laid the letter on the floor beside the photograph. The man's face looked kind, unfamiliar, and somehow close. I stared until the light faded and the shadows blurred his features. My throat ached, but no tears came. I wasn't grieving her anymore. I was grieving the truth she'd buried. I sat there until the clock struck 6. My tea had gone cold. I picked up the letter again, tracing the indent of her pen strokes. Each line was careful, full of love, full of lies. I whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" The empty room offered nothing back. My mother, the woman who raised me on honesty, kept a secret that changes everything. I knew then that this wasn't just about curiosity. It was about who I really was, and what she'd done to keep it hidden. I folded the letter gently and slid it back into the envelope, but not before making myself a promise. I would find out who Paul was. I would uncover what she hid, no matter how painful. The letter says my birth was a lie. His face looked like mine, only younger. That afternoon, I carried the albums to the table and told myself I was only tidying. The sun pressed through the lace curtains and brightened every faded picture. For a second, the old routine returned. Kettle on, cups ready, chair pulled close. I thought about summers when she read letters at the bench. I wasn't tidying. I was hunting. Between plastic sleeves, I found a single glossy print that didn't belong. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, cheek lifted toward a man I didn't know. His jawline matched mine. The date was 1 year before my birth. I held it at arm's length, then close again, fighting the thud. I told the empty room, "Tell me who you are." The mirror above the sideboard threw my own face back, a poor witness. I slid the photo into an envelope so my hands would stop shaking and kept turning pages, stalling for time. The house had been appraised last week. The number sat on a business card by the salt jar, and I wondered what memories sell for. If I sold now, I could cover the tax bill and the last round of medical costs. But if I sold before I knew the truth, I'd be packing a lie for the next owner. The phone rang. "You sound far away," Emma said. "I'm here." "Eating?" I forgot. "Then stop digging." I let the words hang. I said I was fine, and we both knew I wasn't. She kept her voice light, then ended quick, as if silence could save us from the past. I set the phone down and took the photo back out. The man's smile wasn't shy. It was sure, intimate, like he knew the person behind the camera. "If you're him," I whispered. "You belonged somewhere in this house." My throat tightened. I put the albums in a stack to keep my hands busy. I told myself to be careful, to give grief room, but the rules I had lived by all year no longer fit. The picture throbbed in my palm, and a thought I didn't want slid in. If he was my father, then the story I'd recited to every teacher form, every doctor intake, every holiday guest, was a script she wrote for me. The stakes were simple. If I walked away, I'd keep peace and lose myself. If I pushed forward, I might break what little. I got practical, one proof at a time. I compared the photo date to the wedding date on her framed certificate. The numbers argued with each other. I opened a drawer and found a small stack of envelopes rubber-banded together. Utility bills, receipts, a card from a studio downtown with a handwritten slot number and a partial name I couldn't read. I tucked that beside the glossy print. "Answers live in paper," I said. "Paper doesn't blink." Another thought pressed in. The letter from yesterday had used the word hour. If this man was the hour, then where did that leave the husband I grew up with? He'd been strict, distant, good at paying bills on time and staying out late. He left me his old watch and almost no stories. I remembered asking about a missing photograph when I was 12 and being sent to wash dishes instead. I brought the envelope to the light and traced the ink until my eyes watered. I did not have the whole truth, but I had an opening. I would match names to dates, dates to money, money to choices. I would not let a house price decide who I was. I needed answers before I sold anything. Ever. The next step was simple, but hard. Start small. Proceed. The stakes are my identity and my peace. If he's my father, who was the man she married? The lawyer's words cracked my world open. I sat in the stiff chair across his desk, pretending I understood the rhythm of his voice as he read the will. The blinds cut the daylight into sharp bars across the floor. I had come expecting routine formality, not a life rewritten. When he said my name once, then skipped over it, I straightened. He read on until I heard the words, "All assets and property to be transferred to Paul's trust." I felt the floor tilt. "Excuse me," I said. "Who is Paul?" He blinked, polite and professional. "The document doesn't specify further. Your mother was very clear about her instructions." "That can't be right. The house is mine. She told me so." He looked down, rearranging the pages. "I'm sorry, Margaret. Until probate is complete, I can't release copies of the file." I leaned forward. "You mean you won't?" He sighed. "Those are the rules." It was 3 p.m, but the air felt like midnight. The tick of the office clock was loud, cruel even. Behind him, the city noise hummed. Cars, people, money moving, lives going on while mine cracked open. He offered a small condolence, something about grief making things harder to hear. I didn't answer. I only saw the signature line, my mother's looping name beside the date, and beneath it, the words that erased me. When he slid the pen across the desk for acknowledgement, I hesitated. The pen gleamed like a test. I wanted to snap it in half. Instead, I signed the acknowledgement and stood. "I'll need copies," I said. "They'll be available once the estate clears. It's standard procedure." I stared at him. "She raised me on honesty," I said. "Do you believe this is honest?" He didn't reply. His silence was polished, practiced, the silence of someone who had seen too many families unravel over paper. I left the office, gripping my bag so tight my hand ached. Outside, the late-day air smelled of rain and exhaust. I sat in the car for a long time, listening to the echo of his voice reading that clause. My inheritance wasn't just gone. It had been redirected to a stranger's name. A trust for Paul. The same Paul from the letter. The same man in the photograph. I realized this wasn't about money at all. It was about erasure. My mother hadn't only hidden the truth of my birth, she had made it official, sealed it in law. Back home, I put the kettle on out of habit. Steam filled the kitchen, fogging the window until it blurred the garden beyond. I thought of all the times she'd stood there, washing dishes, guarding her secrets in plain sight. I replayed every memory of her protecting that closet, that desk, the shoebox. It wasn't sentimentality, it was defense. I found the old checkbook in her drawer, balanced down to the last cent. She'd managed everything with precision. Rent collected, savings moved, insurance paid. Not a single note of confusion. That meant the will wasn't a mistake. She'd done it knowingly, deliberately. I whispered to the empty room, "Why him, Mother? Why leave it all to him?" The question went nowhere. Only the clock answered, marking each second of what used to be certainty. The truth was starting to form, slow and cold. The inheritance wasn't about dollars. It was about who counted as real in her story. And I had just been written out. I sat at the kitchen table until the light dimmed. Bills lay in a small pile nearby. Property tax, maintenance fees, electricity. Each one a quiet threat. Without that inheritance, keeping the house another year would be impossible. But I couldn't sell it yet. It was the only proof left that I'd existed in her world at all. I picked up a pen from the drawer, the one she always used for signing birthday cards. It felt heavier than it should. I pressed it to a notepad and wrote one name, Paul. Then I drew a small key beside it, the same key that had locked her desk all those years. Her warning came back, faint but sharp. Some things are better left with the dead. Maybe she meant him. Maybe she meant me. Either way, I wasn't leaving it buried. My mother's money went to a stranger's name. Emma told me to stop digging before I got burned. I met her at the small cafe off Main, the one with wobbling chairs and a bell that never rings on time. She was already there, stirring her drink faster than anyone stirs coffee. I sat down and tried to smile. The first sip was bitter and hot, strong enough to bite my tongue. I set the teacup saucer aside like a shield and watched her fingers fuss with a folded newspaper. "Let it go," she said. "Please." "I can't," I said. "Not now." She kept her eyes on the window. "Some stories eat families." "Then tell me before it eats mine." Her mouth tightened. "You don't want this." "I need the truth." She lifted the cup, but didn't drink. The steam curled and faded. "There was a man," she said. "Before the wedding. A friend." She swallowed. "Paul." I held the name like a match. "Friend how?" "Don't climb into this, Maggie. I'm already in. I'm trying to protect you." "You're protecting someone," I said. She pushed the folded newspaper toward me. "People read, people talk." A headline about a councilman's scandal sat on the front page, a warning dressed as news. "Some families have long arms. What does he have to do with us?" "His people helped your mother once. Doors opened, bills got handled. That's all I'll say." "How much help?" "Enough," she said. "Enough to make loyalty expensive." We fell into a quiet that made the silverware chatter sound loud. I thought about the will, about the trust with his name. My life was being priced without me. If I dropped this now, I would keep the peace and lose myself. That is the stake, plain and simple. Did she love him? I don't know, she said, too fast. Emma, she loved you. That's not the question. Her hands shook. Stop before it drags you. No, she flinched. Then the spike came, quick and sharp. Drop it now. Tell me why. Because they watch. Who's they? She glanced at the door. I let 2 breaths pass, then spoke low. What did he give her? Time, she said, and a way out. She pressed the newspaper flat and then pulled it back, as if fearing her own words might leave a mark. You weren't supposed to find the box. So you knew about it. I knew there were things she kept hidden. I didn't go looking. Until now? Until never. She grabbed the bill before I could. My treat. I took it back. No, I'll pay. It isn't about the coffee, she said. It's about attention. I slid cash under the saucer anyway. The small act steadied me. Paying meant choosing the next move myself. When we stood, she reached for my hand, then stopped. Her fingers hung in the air, then closed to a fist. Please, Maggie, don't make enemies you can't see. I already have. We walked out together and split at the corner without saying goodbye. The sky looked too clean. Back home, I stacked the teacup in the sink and left the newspaper on the counter like a dare. Dusk came early, and the quiet turned heavy. I checked the lock twice. At 9, I looked through the curtain and saw a car idling near the gate. It matched her sedan. I called, voice tight. Are you parked outside my house? Silence. Then a soft breath. Go to bed. Why are you watching? To make sure you're safe, she said, and hung up. Safe from whom? I couldn't ask. The porch light bled across the walk and stopped at the fence. I stood very still and felt the choice harden in me. I would not be handled. I would follow the money, the dates, the names, and if doors slammed, I would keep knocking. Emma knew more than she dared to say. The drawer fought me like it was guarding her soul. It was late morning, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. I'd spent an hour wiping dust from the furniture she'd sworn to keep for some day. The desk sat against the wall like a witness, its finish dull, the brass handles cold. I'd never opened the bottom drawer. Not once. Even as a child, I'd been told it was private. But the thought of Paul's trust and that stranger's name on my mother's will wouldn't leave me alone. I pulled at the handle. Nothing. I tried again, harder. The metal stuck, rigid like it had rusted from holding secrets too long. The air in the room thickened. I fetched a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, the same one I'd used when the cabinet hinge came loose last winter. The sound of the metal scraping the lock made me wince, but it gave way with a dull snap. Inside were folded letters tied with twine, a small envelope, and something glinting beneath them. A gold ring. My breath caught. I lifted it, turning it under the light. The engraving was faint, but clear enough to read, P.M. I whispered, Paul. The weight of that name made my pulse thud in my ears. I slid the ring onto my finger without thinking. It fit perfectly, too perfectly. For a second, it felt warm, like it remembered belonging there. I yanked it off and dropped it onto the desk. It rolled once and stopped beside the old ledger where she tracked her bills. I sat down, opening the first envelope. Receipts, regular payments made out to a care facility. The dates stretched back years. The amounts weren't small. Some were even written in her careful handwriting, with notes about transfers. She'd been sending money long after I thought she'd stopped working. She told me her savings were running low, that she needed help paying property tax, and all the while, she'd been keeping someone else afloat. 1,000 questions swarmed my head. Was Paul still alive? Why a care facility? Had she lied about being alone all these years? Every month, money left her account while she rationed groceries and claimed the utilities were too high. I remembered fixing her roof 2 summers ago, paying half the repair bill myself. She'd thanked me with tears, calling me her rock. I clenched my fists now, shaking. The numbers on the receipts blurred, but the betrayal stayed sharp. I reached for another letter, this one addressed to the director. It mentioned continued discretion and family reputation. My stomach turned. She hadn't just supported someone, she'd paid to keep him hidden. The house felt smaller, tighter. Dust floated in the sunlight, slicing across the desk. For a second, I imagined her sitting here, counting the checks, whispering names I never heard. Every lie I'd accepted as love started to collapse into noise. I folded the letters back carefully, almost out of guilt for reading them. Then I stared at the ring again. The engraving shimmered faintly. I picked it up, pressed it into my palm until the edge hurt. I wanted the pain to wake me up. Instead, it steadied me. The sound of the clock in the hallway reminded me how long I'd been sitting there, nearly an hour. Time had slipped the way it used to when I listened to her stories as a child, only now the story was hers, and it wasn't kind. I slid the ring into my pocket and relocked the drawer, though I knew I'd never look at it the same again. The screwdriver lay beside the desk, cold and accusing. I whispered, "You lied to me, Mother. You built a life around someone else." The afternoon light dimmed. I checked my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, the faint mark the ring had left on my finger. That mark felt like proof, not just of him, but of me, of how close her secrets had always been to the surface. I told myself I'd stop there, but I couldn't. If she was paying a facility, there would be a record, a name, an address, something. I'd find it. I had to. The money she sent wasn't kindness. It was connection. And if that connection still existed somewhere, I'd face it. The drawer might have fought me, but it lost. The ring fit like it was meant for me. The nurse froze when I said his name. It was just after 10 when I walked in and asked for Paul. The lobby had plastic chairs and a vending machine that swallowed bills without apology. The whole place carried a sharp hospital clean, the kind that sticks in your throat and feels like a warning. I pressed the visitor badge to my sweater and tried to look like someone who belonged. "I need to see his file," I said. "Paul." Her fingers paused over a keyboard. "Family only." "I have letters," I said, "and a ring." She didn't look at them. "Family only." I held my breath, then let it out slow. "I'm not here to make trouble. I'm here to understand who I am." That part landed. Her eyes flicked to a clipboard on the counter, then back to me. She lowered her voice. "There are rules." "Rules made by who?" "Not me." She glanced down the hall. "You can sign in, that's all." I signed, though the pen scratched like a refusal. A man in scrubs walked past and nodded at nothing. My badge itched against my collarbone. Money had built this quiet, brick by brick. I could feel it. Fees for private rooms, bills for care, transfers made on time. I knew those numbers too well. That money might have been my roof, my heat in winter, my first real rest in years. The stakes stayed simple. If I stop now, I lose myself. "Was he here long?" I asked. "Ma'am, I can't." "Months? Years?" Her mouth tightened. "Please." I leaned in. "What if he has no one? The file can't hurt him now." A second nurse appeared, older, watchful. "Who are you looking for?" she asked. "Paul." "Last name?" I gave it, the one from the receipt stub I'd found in the drawer. She repeated the family line, but soft. "I wish I could help." The older one touched the first nurse's arm. "Lunch," she said, like a cue. When she left, the first nurse slid a sticky note across with a number I didn't recognize, then nudged it back, as if afraid I'd take it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Try upstairs." "Upstairs where?" 214. I thanked her without saying the word. My badge opened the door with a buzz. The hallway stretched long and too bright beneath a low hallway light that flickered like second thoughts. I passed rooms where televisions murmured and no one listened. A cart rattled somewhere out of sight. I counted doors. 212, 214. I pushed the door and found an empty bed with sheets folded into neat squares. The blinds were half open, letting in a slice of steady day. I stood there speechless, like I'd come late to a goodbye. I set my palm on the cool rail and pictured a life hidden in plain paperwork. A man in a white coat stepped in. "Can I help you?" "I'm trying to find someone who was here. Paul." He studied my face, then the ring I hadn't meant to show. "When?" "Recent enough that his records would be active." He paused. "I'm sorry," he said. "He passed away last year." The words dropped hard, then settled into a dull throb. I had rehearsed a dozen speeches, but grief swallowed all of them. "Did he have family?" He shook his head. "No listed contacts. He wasn't cruel, but he was careful." "Can I see his file?" "Files are protected." "I have his letters." "That doesn't make you next of kin." The spikes came fast, bitter and small. "Help me." "I can't. Point me. There are rules." He glanced toward the hall. I let a beat pass. "Who holds the key to those rules?" I asked. "Administration," he said. "Director's office." "Name?" He hesitated like the word cost him. Then he gave it and stepped back. "I wasn't here," he said. I stood alone in that room, pocket heavy with a ring, heart heavier. The quiet was loud enough to make my pulse sound rude. I pressed the badge flat and walked out slowly, memorizing the path back. Downstairs, I returned the pen to the desk and slid a thank you look toward the nurse who had frozen and then thawed just enough. Outside, the parking meter blinked red. I fed it 2 quarters and thought about all the money that had come here in steady streams. That care had cost love and identity, and it hadn't been mine to refuse. I didn't resent the care. I resented the lie that paid for it in silence. I wrote the director's name on the back of the receipt for the badge and tucked it behind my driver's license, where I keep things I cannot afford to lose. If a door doesn't open, I'll find a window. If a window sticks, I'll keep pressing. I have one proof that cannot be argued. I am still standing. Paul was gone, but his records weren't. The envelope arrived with no return address. It was a gray afternoon, the kind where rain threatened but never quite came. Bills and catalogs sat in the stack, but the plain white envelope at the bottom stopped me cold. My name was typed, nothing else. The paper felt too heavy, like it carried breath instead of words. I opened it slowly. Inside, one line in block letters. "Stop digging, Margaret. The truth died with her." No signature, no hint of who sent it, just that command. I read it again, then again, until the words blurred. Fear slid under my skin, but behind it came something harder. Resolve. Whoever sent this knew I was close. I studied the page under the lamp. The font looked like it came from an old typewriter, the kind my mother kept in the attic wrapped in a sheet. I remembered its keys sticking when I tried to use it as a girl. If this letter came from that same machine, it meant the threat wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who knew the family. I set the letter beside the ashtray she used to keep on her desk, though she quit smoking years ago. The ashes were long gone, but the faint gray ring remained. That mark looked permanent. Maybe that's what lies do. Leave residue even after you clean. "Stop digging," the words echoed. I whispered back, "Not a chance." That night, I called the facility again. Same answer, record sealed. I hung up and stared at the phone like it might confess something. Then I searched for names online, staff, board members, anyone tied to the place. That's when I found her. Linda Foster, retired nurse. She'd worked there in the 90s. Her name appeared in an old photo from a charity event my mother once attended. My pulse quickened. There was a link. I found her number listed under a small house outside town. I hesitated before dialing. When she answered, her voice was cautious. "Yes?" "My name's Margaret. I think you knew my mother." Silence stretched, then a sigh. "If this is about Paul, meet me somewhere quiet." We chose the park by the river, mid-morning when few people walk there. I arrived early, watching the slow current. At exactly 11, a small woman in a beige coat approached. She held a paper bag like it carried something fragile. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, eyes darting. "You worked at the care facility." She nodded once. "A long time ago. Things were different then." "Different how?" There were private patients, quiet cases. Paul was one of them. She hesitated. You shouldn't say his name out loud. Why not? Because names tie you to things you can't undo. I held her gaze. I already found the letters, the payments, the ring. Her shoulders sank. Then you know too much to stop. Who was he to her? Linda looked around, then leaned close. Not just a patient. He was her husband. I blinked. Her what? She married him first, before she changed her name, before the second wedding. She was already married when she... Yes. The word landed like a gavel. My knees went weak. How? Why hide it? They couldn't have children. Something happened, a loss. Then came you, and she built a new life. He was sent away. She paid for his care quietly. She lied to everyone. She loved him, Linda said softly. But love can rot when mixed with shame. He was never supposed to surface again. I sat down on the bench, gripping the letter in my coat pocket. The words, "Stop digging," suddenly felt like confession, not threat. Maybe the person who wrote it wanted to protect her memory, not silence me. Or maybe they feared what truth could cost. Why tell me this now? I asked. Linda looked toward the river. Because I saw what hiding did to her. She came to visit him even when he couldn't speak. I watched her bring small gifts, books, rings, things that meant home. She didn't stop until she died. I thought of the care bills, the ring engraved PM. The puzzle clicked, awful and complete. My mother had 2 husbands, one buried in memory, the other on paper. Linda placed the paper bag on the bench. Inside was an old photograph, creased and yellowed. My mother stood beside Paul, both young, both smiling like the world hadn't split yet. She kept this hidden, Linda said. I found it after the funeral. I held the photo up to the light. The resemblance between us was impossible to deny. My chest tightened, not from shock, but from recognition. She told you to stop, Linda said quietly. Maybe she was trying to spare you. I can't be spared now, I whispered. I've already opened the box. When I looked again, Linda was walking away, head low. I folded the letter back into its envelope and tucked it beside the photo. The paper edges cut a small line on my thumb, thin, but it stung enough to remind me that some truths draw blood even when spoken gently. My mother had 2 husbands, and one was hidden. The certificate wasn't forged. It was replaced. The records office was quiet. I asked for my file and slid a form across the counter. The clerk checked my ID, then the request. The paper felt dry under my fingers, rough at the edges like it had been cut by a dull blade. I kept my hands steady. He disappeared and came back with a gray folder. 2 copies, he said. He tapped a stamp against an ink pad, then paused. 2? Original and amended. He opened the folder and laid the first certificate on the counter. I recognized the names I'd said my whole life. Then he set down the second. Same date, same mother, a different father. Paul. My balance tilted. The counter saved me. My fingertips pressed the paper, and the raised seal bit at my skin. It felt like a map I'd been walking wrong for years. I need to understand how this happens, I said. Replacement filings occur with court approval, he said. Name changes, adoptions, legitimation. So someone came in and rewrote me. He didn't answer that. He reached for the stamp. Certified? Yes, I said. The fee sign sat on the glass like a dare. I counted bills, thinking about taxes due and the roof that still leaks. Paying for copies of my own life felt like buying entry to a room I already owned. He stamped the first certificate with a solid thud, then the second. I flinched. The clock above the door clicked toward 12. Who filed the replacement? I asked. He shook his head. Not information I can release. Was it her? I can't say. It was her. He kept his tone smooth. I can provide a process explanation brochure. I don't need a brochure, I need the truth. He slid a leaflet anyway. Petitions are reviewed. If requirements are met, records are amended. I stared at both sheets, the ink clean and official. One life sitting on top of another. If I walk out quiet, I stay erased. "Please," I said, "tell me anything you can." He lowered his voice a fraction. "Look at the corner." He touched the faint filing month embossed in the paper. It matched the year after the second wedding. He didn't look at me. That told me enough. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "Keep both. People lose themselves trying to pick one." The spike arrived the moment I reached for the folder. "Do you have to keep that?" "It's mine." "Rules are rules." "Give me the copies." A beat of silence. He slid them forward. I tucked the certificates into the folder and held it tight against my chest. The edge dug into my forearm. It helped. Outside, wind charged the street and made the flag snap against its pole. I sat on the steps and read each line again. She had taken me to the beach that same year. We ate sandwiches and laughed at gulls. She told me stories about tides and patience. Now I could see what she didn't say. She was already building a new version of us, one that fit a cleaner story and safer money. Protect the marriage, guard the inheritance, bury the man who came first under paperwork. I walked to the corner and bought a cheap folder with a metal clasp. I wanted these pages held by something that wouldn't tear. The cashier said, "Big day?" I said, "Bigger than you think," and paid cash, careful to keep the change. I stood at the curb until a bus hissed past and the noon chime sounded from the church down the block. I had proof I could hold, not just a rumor, not just a memory. This was the midpoint and the turn. From here, I would speak aloud. I will not be edited again, not by paper. She rewrote my birth like it never happened. They called me unstable on local radio. The broadcast came through the kitchen window around 8 in the morning, the same hour I usually made coffee. I wasn't even listening until I heard my own story twisted into gossip. "A woman spreading lies about a sainted family," the host said, accusing her late mother of fraud. The word unstable hung in the air like smoke. I turned the volume up just to be sure. Then I turned it off, heart hammering. The phone buzzed with messages before I even sat down. Emma wrote, "Stop this now, you're hurting everyone." I stared at the text, then at the half-empty mug. I didn't answer. Outside, 2 neighbors who always waved passed my gate without looking. The sound of their footsteps on gravel felt louder than the radio ever could. By noon, I stopped checking messages. Silence was worse than noise, but I needed both hands free to hold steady. The newspaper on the counter had already picked up the story, "Family Feud Over Forgotten Man." My picture wasn't printed, but the details were close enough that anyone could guess. The humiliation burned deeper than anger. They wanted me contained, ashamed, and quiet. That's what this was, a warning in public form. When Linda knocked that afternoon, I thought she'd come to back away like the rest. Instead, she walked in holding an envelope. "You shouldn't be alone," she said. "I'm not. I have a reputation now," I said, half laughing, half breaking. She ignored the sarcasm and set the envelope on the table. I went back to the facility. A friend still works records. I had to see it with my own eyes before bringing it here. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photocopy of a ledger page, yellowed but legible, payments listed. Under my mother's name, followed by the note, "Nursing Services, Confidential Arrangement." Each line showed the same monthly figure. At the bottom, the signature wasn't Paul's. It was one of the nurses. Next to it, written in pen, were the words, "Per discretion agreement." Linda said softly, "That's hush money." The kitchen clock ticked like judgment. I gripped the counter, feeling the cool edge steady my pulse. She paid them to keep him hidden. "Yes," Linda said, "and whoever's behind the smear doesn't want that part known." The spike hit fast. "They think I'll back down. They think you'll crumble. They don't know me." Linda nodded once, "Then prove it." I sat at the table and ran my fingers over the copy, feeling the slight grain of the paper. "If I show this, they'll call it fake." "Then show 2 copies," she said. Make them wonder which one's real. I almost smiled. They already do. The smell of dust and ink filled the air. I switched on the small desk lamp, its glow dim but stubborn. Every time I blinked, the image of my mother's signature reappeared behind my eyes. She had written herself into 2 stories, the mother who sacrificed and the woman who deceived. Now they both lived on a piece of paper that could ruin the version the town worshipped. By 5 o'clock, I walked to the print shop downtown. The man behind the counter barely met my eyes. I paid in cash. He made 5 copies while the machine hummed and spat out truth disguised as office work. Each page came warm to the touch, the ink fresh enough to smudge. I held them like something holy and dangerous at once. Back home, I spread them across the table under the kitchen curtain's weak light. The curtain swayed slightly, a quiet reminder that walls have ears. I folded 1 copy for Linda, 1 for the safety box, 1 for whoever would listen next. The others I sealed in plain envelopes. Proof needed more than belief. It needed to survive me. The radio came on again in the distance, another neighbor tuning in. This time I didn't turn it off. Let them hear my silence. Let them guess what it meant. When the host said unstable, I whispered, "You're right. I'm unstable enough to tell the truth." They want me silent, but I have proof. They tried to make me sit in the back. I arrived at 9 sharp and carried the file tight against my ribs. The courtroom looked smaller than I imagined. Rows of wooden benches, a flag, a high desk where the judge would sit. The clerk's eyes slid past me like I was furniture. I kept walking. The only color was the pale blue of the docket sheets on a cart near the door. I fixed on that blue so I wouldn't shake. "Ma'am, gallery only," the bailiff said. "I'm a party," I answered. He waited. I stepped forward and set my file on the first bench, refusing to move. The opposing attorney whispered to a man in a crisp suit, then smiled like he owned the place. He didn't. When the judge entered, we stood. "Estate of Helen Ward," the clerk called. My mother's name sounded like a door closing. The attorney began smooth. "Your Honor, we ask for dismissal. The claimant has launched a grief-driven campaign, slandering the decedent and disturbing the beneficiaries." "I am the daughter," I said. He didn't look at me. "She is confused." The spike landed fast. "I'm not confused." "Sit down." "Not yet." The judge raised a hand. "One at a time." I took a breath. "I have 2 versions of my birth certificate. Same date, different fathers." I opened the file and laid out the originals in clear sleeves. "I also have payment logs from a care facility, regular transfers for a private patient named Paul." The room shifted. Paper stopped moving. Even the air paused. The attorney laughed without sound. "Unauthenticated documents, Your Honor. None of this meets any standard." I met his eyes. "Then let's authenticate." He pivoted. "This is a probate court, not a carnival. The decedent's will is valid and leaves her property to a lawful trust. This claimant is seeking attention." I felt the bench edge behind my legs and used it to steady my voice. "I'm seeking my life. She rewrote it to fit a cleaner story and a better inheritance. The trust wiped me out on paper. The truth can fix the record, even if it never pays $1. A quiet ripple moved across the benches. 2 coughs, a small gasp, a whispered, "That's her." Emma sat near the aisle, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. When she finally looked up, I saw fear and something like pity. She didn't nod. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Ward, approach." I carried the file to the bench. The clerk took each page and passed them up. The judge read in silence, then compared seals, dates, and names. "Where did you obtain these?" she asked. "City records. The clerk issued both. The facility ledger came from a former nurse. She also gave me a photograph." I lifted the picture just high enough for the judge, not the gallery. "My mother is with the man listed on the original certificate. Their marriage certificate exists. It was hidden, not lost." The attorney scoffed. "Hearsay and ancient history." "History is why we're here," I said. He stepped closer. "So you smear a dead woman to chase money?" That money kept a secret in place and bought my silence. I won't buy it back." He glanced at the benches, playing to the room. "Your Honor, this is public theater." The judge set the papers down. "The court decides what matters." She turned to me. "Do you understand that even if the will stands, the record may change but the assets may not?" "Yes." "Then why proceed?" "Because a lie has weight. I've carried it for years without knowing. I can't carry it anymore." Another ripple. A woman murmured, "Let her speak," and a man shushed her. The bailiff frowned, then looked at the judge. The judge tapped the bench once, thinking. "Counsel, the existence of 2 certificates is not trivial. Nor is a prior marriage if proved. We have a duty to the integrity of the record." The attorney tried again. "We ask you to deny any investigation." "On what basis?" "It harms reputation." The judge's voice cooled. "Courts are for facts, not comfort." I felt my throat loosen. I thought of property tax bills stacked at home, of late notices, of the small balance I'd been guarding like a flame. I thought of the cost of these copies and the price of showing up. If I stopped here, I would keep quiet and lose myself. "Your Honor," I said softly, "I just want the truth on the record." She studied me a long moment. "Return to your seat." I did. Emma looked away when I passed. The judge said, "We'll reopen her estate." Vindication came wrapped in hate. The article went live before sunrise, and by the time I checked the porch, the paper was wedged tight in the mailbox, damp along the edge. "Daughter uncovers hidden marriage," the headline shouted across my kitchen table. The picture wasn't mine, but the story was, and it felt like someone had peeled my skin back and pinned it flat. The ink bled a little onto my thumb. I kept reading anyway. By mid-morning, my phone rattled with messages. Some were kind. "You gave me courage." I thought I was alone. Others were knives. "Monster." "Grave robber." One said, "You just want money." I stared at that one longer than I should have. If I wanted money, I would have kept quiet and let the trust feed its own. I wanted air. Emma sent a single line. "I told you it would hurt." I typed, erased, then typed again. It already did. I didn't press send. Not yet. Reporters began circling like crows around a field. A white sedan idled at the curb, camera balanced on the passenger seat. When I stepped outside, a woman hurried up my walk. "Margaret, 2 questions." "No." "Just 1 soundbite." "No." "Why do this now?" "Because silence costs too much." I shut the door, chest tight. I could feel the town turning me over like a coin, front, back, front, testing whether I spent clean. The stakes stayed simple and ruthless. If I back down now, the lie wins and I lose myself again. The mailbox clanged. A second paper landed with a heavier thud, the Sunday edition, early. An op-ed called me brave but misguided. It praised my mother's charity work and wondered if grief had made me cruel. I wanted to send them the receipts with the neat monthly totals, the copies I'd made at the print shop, the ledger line where discretion sat like a stain. Proof doesn't erase pain, it just makes doubt lonely. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then I picked up on the next call, a number I didn't know. "You should be ashamed." "Why?" "You're dragging a good woman through the mud." "I'm cleaning it off the truth." "You're sick." "I'm healed enough to speak." The line clicked dead. I pressed the cool glass of the phone to my wrist until the heat in my skin settled. Across the street, a neighbor who once shared her pie recipe crossed her arms and watched my door, then went inside. The curtain in her window moved like a blink. Linda came by with an extra copy of the article, the one with the court summary printed beneath. "They at least got the facts straight," she said, eyes soft. "Facts don't comfort many," I said. "They strip the story of its padding." "You did what most of us won't," she said. "You paid the price and told the truth." The spikes cracked open between us. Was I cruel? No. Did I betray her? You refused to be erased. Do I keep going? Yes. I breathed out slowly. Then I will. After she left, I opened a shoebox where I keep bills and spare envelopes. The property tax notice stared up at me like an unpaid dare. Court had no guarantee of money. Everything might remain tied up for years, interest nibbling away at what little I have. But my voice was free, and freedom has its own economy. I wrote myself a promise on a sticky note. I will not pay with silence again. By afternoon, a small knot of people gathered near the mailbox. Someone lifted their phone. I cracked the door. "Please leave," I said. "We have questions." "I've already answered them in court." "Say something for the camera." I stepped onto the porch and pointed at the article. "It's all there." A man smirked. "You like attention. I like accuracy. Your mother can't defend herself. She defended a secret for decades. I'm defending the record." He laughed. "You think truth feeds you?" "No, it frees me." He lowered the phone. "You sound rehearsed." "I sound decided." They drifted back to their cars, not satisfied but bored, which can be kinder than rage. I stood by the mailbox and touched the metal door, warm from the day, solid. I pictured letters she'd sent, checks she'd written, the slow drain of our life moving outward in tidy increments. Some of that money could have been my winter heat, my roof repairs, my small rest after hard years. I will carry that math, but I won't let it own me. As evening leaned in, my screen lit up again. Messages from strangers filled the space friends used to keep. A woman whose father's name was changed without her knowing. A man whose mother hid an older brother in a facility for decades. A daughter who said, "Thank you for saying the thing that shattered me." I answered a few. I saved many for later. I cannot heal them, but I can refuse to hide. I stacked the papers by the door, camera still parked beyond the hedge, mailbox standing like a stubborn witness. The world finally knew, and judged us both. His handwriting made me cry before I read a word. Linda found the envelope tucked inside the last of Paul's medical papers. She said, "It's addressed to you," and handed it over like a fragile relic. The paper was soft, edges worn from years of hiding. My hands trembled as I slid a finger under the seal. I didn't want to open it. Not yet. The ink on the outside had faded to a faint gray, but the name was still mine. I traced it once, then again, feeling the small grooves pressed by his pen. I unfolded the page. The smell of old paper filled the air, that quiet sweetness of dust and time. The words blurred before I could focus. I wiped my eyes and started reading. "Margaret," it began. Just that one word broke me. No one had said my name like that in years. Steady, sure, without judgment. "Your mother loved us both in different ways. She chose silence to keep you safe. I wanted to tell you myself, but I didn't want to ruin her peace." I stopped there, trying to breathe. The clock in the hallway ticked toward 6. The sound steadied me, 1 second after another. I kept reading. "She never stopped looking over your shoulder. You had her strength, her stubbornness. I saw you once at the pier when you were a child. You held her hand and told her the world smelled like rain. I stayed far enough back that you wouldn't notice. You laughed, and that was enough for me." I pressed the letter to my face. The paper's edges scratched my cheek, grounding me in the present. I could almost hear the echo of that memory, waves hitting the pier, the faint hum of wind through the window from mornings long ago. "He called me his daughter," I whispered. The words didn't feel borrowed anymore. They felt earned. Linda sat beside me without speaking. The quiet between us was kind, not heavy. She reached for my hand. "It's proof," she said softly. "Not the kind they stamp or sign, but the kind that lasts." I nodded. He wrote himself into truth. Outside, the sky dimmed. I watched the light bend across the glass, the same window that had once shown me my mother's silhouette when she thought I was asleep. I saw her again in memory. Hair pinned back, eyes tired, but full of purpose. She was complicated, maybe cruel, but also afraid. The letter didn't absolve her. It only revealed how deep the fear ran. Linda said, "Do you want me to file it with the others?" "No," I said. "This one stays with me." I folded the page slowly, smoothing the creases with my palm. "He called me daughter. I whispered again, and this time I smiled. That's the record I'll keep. I placed the letter inside a plain envelope and slipped it into the drawer with the old ring she'd given me on my 50th birthday. It wasn't valuable, just a thin band with a small stone, but tonight it shone as if it remembered too. For a moment, I thought of the inheritance, the hearings, the accounts still frozen. I thought of the papers locked away in government drawers. None of that would change this. A man's hand, his ink, his final act of truth. I owed him the quiet dignity of belief. Linda rose to leave. You okay? I'm something better, I said. I'm whole. She nodded. Then I'll see you tomorrow. After she left, I sat by the window and let the cool air wash over me. The curtains shifted, and the sound of wind filled the room. I closed my eyes and let it carry me back to the pier, to that morning of salt and laughter. The years between then and now folded like pages in a story, finally finding its last line. I don't know if forgiveness is ever complete, but I do know this. It isn't about pretending nothing hurt. It's about naming the pain and keeping what survived it. He called me his daughter. Letting go felt like theft. By noon, the lawn filled with bidders. The auctioneer tested his mic and tapped the hammer on the table. The patter rolled over the yard, unstoppable. I stood on the porch, hands still. Start with the dining set, the clerk said, checking my ID before pinning a seller's tag to my sleeve. I nodded. Let's get through it, I said. If I kept everything, I would stay trapped. They carried the chairs down the steps. Do I hear 50? The auctioneer called. The number climbed. Sold? I watched a young couple smile like they had won a small future. I wanted to bless them and also take it all back. Box lots, the clerk announced. He lifted a cardboard box full of framed photos without the pictures, just the frames and the shadows they left behind. $10 to open? A hand went up. 15, 20, sold. The frames left, as if memories could be measured by inches. I signed the first slips. Commission 10%. Catalog fee $50. I initialed each line. The clerk kept the originals and handed me a carbon copy. You'll get the bank transfer within 3 business days, he said, after we deduct the hauling. Every goodbye sends a bill. Any reserves on the rugs? He asked. No, I said. Let them go. He noted it. A woman stroked the border and nodded at her partner. 300, she called. 350, someone countered. 400. The hammer fell, brisk and final. Another corner priced and released. Emma stood at the fence for a while, not crossing. We didn't speak. When a man asked if the shed was part of the sale, she answered first, only what's tagged. Then she left a brown envelope on the mailbox and walked away. Inside, later, a simple note, I am sorry for my fear. The auctioneer took a breath. Next up, the ring dish and lot of keepsakes. He lifted a small tray. I shook my head. Withdraw that one. He nodded and set it aside. Boundaries still matter. We moved room to room, the crowd thinning and swelling. The hallway echoed with shoes and short bargains. Cash? A man asked, waving a folded stack. The clerk shook his head. Card or check? Clean trails would help when probate asked for totals. A tally ran along the margin. $2,480, then $3,160, then $3,940. Numbers were not comfort, but they were order. Near the end, I carried the empty shoebox out myself and set it on the final table. It was the same box that had cracked my life open. Someone pointed. What's in it? Nothing, I said. That's the point. A small boy tugged his mother's sleeve. Can I have it for my baseball cards? She lifted her hand. 5. He hugged the box like it could teach him how to keep safe what mattered. Sold. I kept the auction slip for that last lot and slid it into my pocket. When the totals were counted, I asked the clerk to write one separate check for the care facility. $2,000, I said, in his name. The clerk looked at me, then wrote without comment. Money can't heal, but it can admit the wound. Spikes rose and fell through the final minutes. Last chance. Bid or pass. Sold. Each smack of the hammer closed a door I had kept open. The lawn emptied. I signed the sheet for the house keys. The buyer's agent said, "Closing is in 10 days." I said, "Sooner if you can." He promised to try. Inside, the rooms were bare, their edges clean and sharp. I opened the kitchen drawer and left the spare keys where we kept rubber bands. I pressed my palm to the counter once just to mark the spot. Then I turned toward the door. I left the key on the counter and walked away. I still make tea at dawn, but the silence feels different. The kettle hums softly, and for once, I don't rush it. Steam curls upward, carrying that faint, earthy scent I've known all my life. In the old house, this hour felt like waiting, the stillness before a storm. Now it feels like breathing. The sun edges over the horizon, painting the small kitchen in pale gold. The light touches the teacup before it reaches me, like a quiet promise that I'm still here. I moved 3 months ago into this modest apartment near the coast. Rent isn't cheap, but it's honest. Every bill I pay feels like proof that I've built something of my own. The walls are bare except for one photograph, a wave breaking mid-crest, and a small clock that keeps steady time. No echoes, no footsteps in the hall, no boxes sealed with guilt. "Simple," I told the landlord when he showed me the place. "I don't need much." He nodded, handed me the keys, and said, "Peace costs less than people think." He was wrong about the price, but right about the value. I pour the tea. The warmth seeps through the cup into my hands. "You survived," I whisper, though I'm not sure to whom. Maybe to the woman I was, maybe to both of them, the mother who hid and the father who wrote. Paul's letter rests in the top drawer of my desk. I haven't read it again. I don't need to. Knowing it's there is enough, like a lighthouse you never visit but still trust to shine. Beside it sits her ring, the same one that once felt like a shackle. Now it's only a circle of metal, a memory with softened edges. I keep it not as proof, but as peace. The morning smell of salt here, sharp and alive. I open the window just enough to let the air in. Somewhere below, a man sweeps the walkway, the scrape of the broom steady and calm. It reminds me of ordinary life. Rent due, groceries to carry, neighbors to nod to, but never explain yourself to. Ordinary is a blessing I once mistook for loss. Sometimes I catch myself expecting the phone to ring, another voice asking for statements, signatures, clarifications. But it doesn't. The estate closed, the debt settled. The money didn't stretch far, but enough to start again. Enough to pay off the last medical bill, to buy this chip table, to stand in my own kitchen without ghosts demanding payment. I lift the cup, watching the steam rise. It blurs the window pane for a moment before clearing. "So this is what freedom looks like," I murmur. It isn't loud or grand. It's the absence of weight. A few days ago, I mailed a donation to the care facility. Not large, but sincere. In the note, I wrote, "For those who loved quietly and paid dearly." No name, no return address. I sealed it and dropped it into the blue mailbox by the pier, the same one where I used to send reports, demands, questions. Now it carries only release. When the clock strikes 7, the first streak of sunlight hits the rim of the cup. I let it warm my face. Once I thought I needed to erase everything to heal. Now I understand. Healing means carrying truth without letting it burn. The ocean glints through the window, steady and endless. The same sea that might have once heard my mother's secrets now listens without judgment. I whisper the only vow that still matters, not for revenge, not for justice, but for peace. I'll keep no more lies. I set the empty cup down and breathe in the air, thick with salt and mourning. The world feels wide again. The past no longer claws at the door. It's behind me, where it belongs. The past finally stayed closed. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story. With respect and gratitude,